Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions. You know, the other day I was coming into the little side guest room that we have that I sometimes use for taking a nap, that I sometimes use because there's another little TV in there. I use it for a variety of things. It's the room where we iron, but it's also the room that has two of my main personal bookcases in it. And I was moving a book out. I think I was checking a baseball stat. And sometimes you might go weeks and weeks and weeks without really doing anything at all with your bookcase. You walk in, you look at it, you see the books that you've read in the past, or maybe a couple you haven't read yet, and you think, well, that looks cool and it's nice, but when you actually pull a book out or put a book back, I find myself spending a considerable amount of time being at the bookcase because it triggers memories and it makes me think, hey, I think I'll check something out there, or I don't remember that I even read that book, or I've got to read that book. And so it gave me the idea that I would take a little tour of my two main bookcases, maybe a little bit more. We have a lot of bookcases in our house, and we have a lot of books that are elsewhere too. But we've kind of taken this one main one and put a lot of the things that maybe mean the most to me or the ones I want to have quickest access to. So today, in a little bit of a different thing, which I guess is kind of artsy and is kind of lifestyle-ish, I'm going to do a little tour of a couple of bookcases because they provide memories, they provide mileposts, and they also provide things to look forward to in the future that you say, I've got to read that. I've meant to read that. That was a great gift. Why haven't I read it yet? Well, you'll find out one of the reasons coming up first as we continue on Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions. Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Visions' goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's becoming a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com and let Chad help you. It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodle of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here, upwards of 2 years. My back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Welcome back, and I'll start with I miss flying. And you might wonder why that has anything to do with this particular topic. Well, it directly has something to do with this particular topic. At one point in my broadcasting career, I would fly upwards of 100 or maybe even more times per year. And that was the time when I actually read books. I read a lot. I do a lot of research. Now I run a business. But the time for actually reading a book and getting the time to read a book almost always came on a plane. And I haven't been on a plane in a while, and my travel schedule diminished over time as well. It was especially high during times when I did the UMKC games for 7 years, and of course that's a schedule that has 35 to 38 games, and that's 2 flights. There, you're right there at 75 already, and of course I cover the NCAA tournament and spring training and all kinds of things like that, so it would indeed get up to be 100, and that's where I read most of the books that I'm looking at right now, and it was really a great time for me to catch up with a book that I wanted to read, and I would look forward to it. And it was also the time where I would maybe do some really light reading. Oftentimes on those trips I'd be doing a lot of research, but then maybe on the flight back I'd get to read my book. Well, the one thing that I'm looking at that dominates here, the proceedings in this particular bookcase that I'm looking at, are the about 50 books that I have from the author Robert B. Parker. There's a real incredible story behind that. I don't know if it's incredible. It's incredible to me. My favorite author is Raymond Chandler. He is the author of The Big Sleep and a few other famous books like that, but he only wrote a few books. He's also famous for writing the screenplay for Double Indemnity and The Blue Dahlia. He won an Academy Award and was nominated for others. But the problem is that he only wrote 7 books in his lifetime. He didn't start writing until he was 50. And so that left me with a favorite author who doesn't have much material. So having read his books numerous times, I was always on the lookout for somebody who maybe was somewhat like his style. The thing about Raymond Chandler was the fact that it wasn't the whodunit aspect of his detective stories that mattered. It was the wordplay and the wisecracks and the character development and setting the scenes. In fact, he famously was called by the director of The Big Sleep at one point in the filming of it, and he wasn't involved in that particular film. He didn't write the screenplay or anything else. And they asked him who was the person who murdered one particular character in the story. And he paused and he said, "I don't know." And he didn't know, but it didn't matter. Now, that was probably the only time he had that lapse, but he was a drinking man indeed. But anyway, so having him only written those 7 books, I was always looking for another writer who kind of fit into that style or that I enjoyed so much, and I never really was able to find it until around 2000. and it was be an author who started writing his books in the 1970s, and luckily for me, was an incredibly prolific writer. Robert B. Parker is his name, as I mentioned before, and he started writing in the 1970s, and his most famous character is the Spencer character, a detective in Boston. And he wrote a wide variety of things, but his major focus was that particular character. He also had a series of books that he wrote with a female detective. He had a series of books that he had with Jesse Stone, who you might have seen. Tom Selleck played him in a variety of television movies for one spot in time. But the Spencer books are the ones that are the most important to me. And I discovered them in a time where I was going through a difficult time. I had just been divorced. I had trouble sleeping, and I probably read half the books that Robert B. Parker wrote in that genre at that point in time, and he became my favorite author of somebody who was actually writing books then, and he continued on being very prolific until about 2010 when he passed away. He was a successful enough writer, a top 10 New York Times bestsellers person, that type, that when he passed away, his estate, after a couple of years, hired other writers, other famous detective writers, to continue the series on. And those books are actually quite good. I pretty much kept to the ones that are about the Spencer series, but the authors who did them wrote them in that vein. And what was interesting is that Raymond Chandler's last book was unfinished, and the estate of Raymond Chandler, ironically enough, asked Robert B. Parker several years ago, many years ago, to finish that book. Chandler only wrote a little bit of it, and so it was really pretty much Robert Parker's book, and later on he would get permission from the Raymond Chandler family, and he would write a Philip Marlowe story in the vein of Raymond Chandler as well. So he had kind of set that particular example in his own life, and that's probably one of the reasons that his relatives decided that it was a good idea to carry on his legacy, and those books have sold very, very well and done very well. Haven't read one in a while because, as I said, I'm not traveling much anymore. So those books, most of them paperbacks, but a few the hard copy when I wanted to spring for something a little bit more, are what kind of dominates this particular bookcase. But there are a wide variety of other things that also show the interest that you have and where you were at a certain time and what you wanted to read and what you didn't want to read. And on the second row here, there's a whole bunch of books that are basically about movies. I took a detective story class in college. That's what inspired me to become a fan of Raymond Chandler. That's what inspired me to become a fan of old movies. And so I have a lot of books here that are dedicated to older movies, biographies, Barbara Stanwyck, people like that. I have a couple of books that are collections of the famous movie critic Pauline Kael. What's interesting about that is the fact that Pauline Kael and I really don't see that much eye to eye, and when I read a collection of reviews by her, a collection of essays, often we don't have the same feeling about the movies, that we don't have that in common. But she's such a good writer that it's interesting to read them. One of the books is called 5,000 Nights at the Movies, and it has about 5,000 movies in it. Well, it's about the fact that she wrote about upwards of 5,000 movies, and there's little mini reviews of those in there, and it's a really, really interesting book. I'm looking at another book here called Great TV and Movie Detectives, and that was given to me as a present by one of my best friends, Brian Moylan. And that's another thing that you see when you're looking at your bookcase. You remember how you got the book, how you acquired it, who maybe got it for you. There are some rock autobiographies in front of me as well, one by Bruce Springsteen, one by Peter Townsend. I can highly recommend the Pete Townsend one. It's called Who I Am. I will not be as enthusiastic about the Bruce Springsteen one, which I didn't finish, and I don't know if I ever will finish it. It's good. It's interesting. And if you like Bruce Springsteen and you like him a lot, you probably will like the book a little bit better than me. I am a fan of Bruce Springsteen, but I'm not necessarily a fan of how dense his writing is in this particular book. So that's an interesting one. And I do like reading biographies and autobiographies, and haven't read as many as I would like to, because a lot of times I just wanted to settle in and read myself a nice detective story by Robert Parker. There are a couple subsets here of books that I have a lot of by a particular author. One of those is John Feinstein, the famous sports writer. And, of course, his first famous book was the book about Bob Knight, Season on the Brink, but he has written many, many, many books since then, and I have quite a few of them. And he is a very, very good writer. But his writing is more of a sports writer, weaving tales that are often retold by other people. He's not, to me, the most creative writer in the world, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't write great books. His books are interesting, they're well-researched, he's a fine interviewer, and he brings out the best in the people that he talks to, and it creates really interesting books from basketball to golf to just about everything else, football. He's done just about everything. He's maybe known the most for basketball and then golf, but he's written about a lot of different things as well. I mentioned that I often have searched for detective stories that sort of fit into the kind of first person, which is the way Raymond Chandler wrote, which is the way Robert Parker writes. And a lot of times I didn't even want to start reading a series of books if they weren't written in the first person. That's just a particular thing for me in my detective stories. But there was one I got a couple of years ago called Racing the Devil by an author named Charles Todd. And he sets his books in the 19-teens and 1920s. It is first person, but it's kind of thing that I'm surprised that I even liked. I love the book. And he has a series of these books, and they're about a detective who was shell-shocked in World War I, and so he has a lot of demons going around in his head, and that's not particularly my particular wheelhouse, as it were, but I really enjoy that, and the author Charles Todd is somebody who I would highly recommend as well. And the other little subset of books, and he didn't write many, but they sure are good, and I wrote a blog about this recently, are George Carlin's books. One of them is called Brain Droppings. One of them is called When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops? He wrote his own biography, which he decided early on to publish only posthumously, and it's called Last Words by George Carlin, obviously. And all three of those books, and he wrote a couple others, are highly recommended. The only thing I wouldn't recommend is that you don't read them on a plane, because you will, unless you don't mind being embarrassed by the fact that you're going to laugh out loud a lot, and people are going to look at you and want you to be a little more quiet and a little bit more respectful on the plane. But so if you are worried about that type of thing, then don't read any of George Carlin's books when you're flying. I'd give you that recommendation. Well, one thing you haven't heard me mention so far is baseball. And that doesn't mean that there aren't a whole lot of baseball books in front of me as I look at this particular bookcase. And as we continue this little tour, I'll continue on and talk a little bit about that. In fact, I'll probably talk a lot about that coming up. And there's some coffee table books to look at. It's just my little idea to perhaps inspire you to explore your bookcase that you've left untended or just untouched for quite a long time, for the books that you've read in the past and maybe a few that you'd like to read in the future. It's all part of Arts and Lifestyle Wednesday, presented by Cinematic Visions, and you'll have more of this little ditty coming up.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
Most of us have experienced auto accidents, and it's no fun. And even less fun is trying to work on the insurance aspects afterwards and getting full value after an auto accident. I'm here with David Cowan from WreckExpert.com. And David, you have an unusual and important niche for people after an auto accident.
We have a passion to teach car wreck clients what they deserve. Getting your car repaired only fixes the damage and the paint. Getting paid for your car's loss in value is called diminished value. Chances are you've never heard of this before because most people aren't looking out for you. We help people collect thousands to tens of thousands of dollars for their car's loss in value after the wreck.
And if somebody wants to come to you for that, what's the original assessment cost them?
We offer a free review of any insurance claim to see how we can help.
You can't beat that. Great expertise and assistance in getting full value after an auto accident from David Cowan. Visit WreckExpert.com and learn more.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence. I just want to thank everybody for supporting local restaurants during this time of uncertainty. 23rd Street Brewery is now open until this pandemic is over. And right now, more than anything, local restaurants need your help and support. Come on out and see us. 23rd Street Brewery is open now from 11:30 till 9 o'clock for dine-in and carry-out. Whatever we can do to help you out, maybe with your catering needs, too. I appreciate all the support, and thank you for continuing to shop local.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices. And we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days, as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the pure gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML 830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkScale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Welcome back, and if you listened to me through the years, you probably know that I love all sports, but baseball is my favorite sport. There are other sports maybe I even enjoyed playing more through the years. I don't know, I loved playing baseball when I played it. I certainly became an avid golfer. I loved playing basketball when I played it seriously for a few years. But baseball is really my love, and it's my love as a reporter and as a broadcaster and as a researcher. And I got the very first Bill James baseball abstract, and I got every single one of them until he started switching to doing something slightly different. They're not all in this particular bookcase, but there's quite a few of them, maybe years that I wanted to keep special. The very first one is here. The 1986 one is here because that was a big year for the Astros, and it was still a baseball abstract. And those books obviously were written before seasons and about the previous season, so you kind of got a fun idea of what Bill James was thinking about, the great baseball sabermetrician, about a season ahead and maybe how accurate he would be about that particular season. Also, the Elias Baseball Abstract came out a few years after Bill James started, and that was a fantastic book. I don't really even know if they still do it. They probably do. A lot of these books were of a time where obviously there was no internet. You actually had to hunker down and get a book out and not just go to baseballreference.com, which is such a fantastic tool and which I use all the time now when I'm researching baseball as well. And but there's something fun about just settling in and wasting a bunch of time looking at statistics, or in the case of Bill James, reading he was a very funny writer at times, and now you probably see him as a very voluminous tweeter, and he does polls and all kinds of things a lot. Has long since been in the Red Sox organization and does a little bit less of that now. I don't even know if he does any of that now, but they are quite a few Bill James baseball abstracts, and I certainly pull those out every now and then. But the one thing I do the most that regards baseball is I have an old copy of the Baseball Encyclopedia, and it's an edition that only goes up to 1987, I believe. I'm not looking at it right now. The inside of it, I'm looking at it, but it doesn't matter. That particular book is mine to pull out sometimes before I go to sleep, and I don't do that very often anymore. I used to do it more, but if I do that, then often it will be the Baseball Encyclopedia that will be laying on the bedside, opened up to a certain page, and all I do is just flip it open and start flipping to different pages, and it doesn't matter that all these players are from the 20s and 30s and 40s, because that's what I want. If I want more recent baseball information, I can go to a computer, and certainly I can go to a computer for that, but I love picking out that big, fat, heavy book and looking at baseball statistics, and I have several different types of baseball encyclopedias. And one other encyclopedia that I have that's really cool that I can highly recommend is A History of the NCAA Basketball Tournament. And that particular book goes up to 1990. And if you want to go on eBay or something like that, it's actually the Encyclopedia of the NCAA Basketball Tournament, written by Jim Savage, or compiled, I guess is more like it. And it has every single box score of every single NCAA tournament game through the year. Now, some of them are less sophisticated box scores from the past, but they certainly give you an idea of what went on, the players and so forth. There's a little bit of text as far as it's concerned for each year. And it's another thing where if you're interested in things more recent, then you can do that by looking at your computer. And if you just want to go on eBay or search out something, this would give you hours of endless silly fun looking at old NCAA tournament basketball box scores through the years. And it's something that's a whole lot of fun for me as well. The Big Coffee Table and those type of books, I have a bunch of those too. A lot of them are movie books with beautiful movie pictures. Some of them are things that I've just found in old big bookstores. There's a thing called Bobby Jones Extra, which is a bunch of headlines from newspapers about the great golfer Bobby Jones. Another time you think of things that are mileposts in your life, I have this gigantically fat pictorial chronicle of the 20th century, historical one. That was a Christmas present from a girlfriend. I remember that. And I don't remember what year it was. It was around 1988, 87, something like that. And I still go back and look at that particular book every now and then. My high school yearbook is there, and there's a big fat coffee stain on there, which is odd because I don't drink coffee. There's a book of classic singles. That's mostly a pictorial book. I have a whole bunch of those type of books, one called A World of Movies, The Hollywood Archivist. There's a history of the MGM studios in the glory days that I got in the library somewhere sometime. I may have even purloined that particular book. I'm not particularly sure. Maybe I found it in an old bookstore. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. I was known to maybe borrow a book or two from a library during my course in time. I'm probably the only person in the history of college, maybe not, who actually used to cut class to go to the library and just enjoy the things at the library that had nothing to do with my studies. And there's probably a couple of books kicking around here that are in that particular vein as well. So far and wide, from a big 1,000-page book about Ted Williams and a bunch of other things that I haven't maybe even quite gotten to yet. That's one of them. I've only read about a third of the book by Ben Bradley Jr. called The Kid about Ted Williams. It's really a great book. I just started it and never have completed it. And that's the other thing that's a real treasure of sitting here right now and looking at the two, main bookcases that I look at the most. There's a big one downstairs that has more of my wife's stuff in it and all her opera singing things and stuff like that. And some of my books, like about 8 editions of Leonard Maltin's movie reviews, those little capsule movie reviews for you. But those things are all tremendous amount of fun. But kind of taking this thing full circle, one of the real regrets of my life is that at one point in time, things weren't going so well, and I lived in a bad apartment in Lawrence, Kansas, and the car that I was driving at the time conked out, died. I didn't have the money to fix it, and so it just sat there in the parking lot, and they wanted me to get rid of it. And being a lazy, not very focused person that I was at that point in time, I just kind of let it ride and didn't do anything with it. And one day I came back from trying to seek employment around Lawrence, and the car was gone. It's not that I was ever going to drive it again. It was dead. It was on blocks, basically, but I had never completely unloaded the car. It was the car I drove back from Massachusetts the last time I went to Lawrence, Kansas to live, when I would end up working in a bean factory and then concluding my college years. But the upshot of the story for this particular enterprise is the fact that there was a huge trunk that contained all the books that I had then, and I had never unloaded it from that car. And they took it to the junkyard, And I went basically the same day. I found a friend and went racing out there, and they had actually smashed the car and flattened it, and all those books were gone. And there's only a couple of books out of that I really regret, and one of them's just goofy, silly fun. It was a book called The 50 Worst Films of All Time. And it was a hysterically funny book. It was written in the late 1970s, maybe later than. No, it was later because The Omen was in it, so it was probably the early 80s. And I've never been able to find that book. I have looked and looked and looked online and researched it. And maybe if you're out there listening right now and you can find it, that'd be a great thing. I think I wrote about it in a blog or two before. And then there was also History of the American Presidency. It was a fantastic book I got when I was a kid, actually, from my parents for a birthday present. And it was really, really a great book. And I think it went up to about 1968 or something like that. And it'd be a chapter of like 50, 75 pages about each presidential election, and there were cartoons and photographs. It was just a fabulous book, and those are the only two things I really, really remember from that particular trunk full of books. But in the case of me staring at these bookcases right now, that is a wistful moment in my life when one really silly book and one book that I really treasured very much, the presidential book that was such an epic thing, probably was, again, maybe 1,000 pages long. So from an encyclopedia of rock to Robert B. Parker to Hollywood to the little artifacts you have, my bookcases almost completely have books in them, but there is my favorite picture of myself and my daughters from when they were, young teens, and it was on my birthday, and I love that picture. There's a Houston Astros baseball up there. There's a couple of other doodads, but mostly there's just books. And every now and then I just like coming in here and taking a look at it, and I think that this is something that maybe you should do. There must be a bookcase in your house that has a whole bunch of things that you hardly ever look at. And sometimes it's just a whole lot of fun to go back and do it again. I've only scratched the surface of what I did. You probably got more information than you ever wanted to have. But indeed, it's a nice trip down memory lane for me, and maybe something that could trigger some great memories for you, be it the books that you've read, that you haven't read, that you want to read, that you want to revisit. Those mystery books that I've all read, I can't really reread them that often, maybe once in a while, because I know what happens, even though I don't care about the plot that much. I care about the way they're written, so I do go back every now and then. I think I've only missed about 6 or 7 of Robert Parker's books, which I haven't been able to find yet. So those are the types of things I wanted to explore today, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're listening at this point in the podcast, then you did. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your joining me with a little reverie, and maybe, as I said, I can inspire you to hit the books. Because indeed, as the title of this goes, a bookcase is not just furniture.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Klingscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new. This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
NoNonsenseHealthcareNinja.com, specializing in expert healthcare guidance and assistance for you.